Hello and welcome to this episode of Quaker. In this episode, I'm going to be looking at the Quaker relationship with music, especially in the liberal tradition. In a tradition which loves silence so much, how does music work? So in this episode, we're going to look at maybe the history of the relationship between Quakers and music. What's been that trajectory? Where do we find ourselves now? It does depend on which flavour of Quakerism you're going for, in terms of what that relationship might look like. So we'll look at that as well. And then at the end, I want to maybe just highlight some maybe famous Quaker songs or musicians or artists so that we can listen to Quaker music together. It's like with many parts of the traditional Anglican church service, music, so things like hymns and so on, was taken away from Quaker meetings for worship when they started forming in the 17th century. Even the Psalms, so things which have a very long history, even amongst early Christians, were taken away, I suppose, to stop distraction from the silence, and only vocal ministry being something that is spoken out loud. And this general attitude didn't just actually come in just meeting for worship, it also extended to outside life as well. So Robert Barclay in his Apology, for example, has a whole chapter talking about how bad music and the theatre is. And at first, when I first read that, I kind of, I think I did read it, but I kind of just discredited it because I thought it was just that was just Puritan vibes of that period. Oh no, we can't go to the theatre, we can't listen to music, that's too worldly, we need to avoid that and just be all very stern and just focus on God's love or wrath or whatever. But I can't remember where I read it or I heard it or something. I heard some Quaker mentioning that it was perhaps also due to the social distinctions that going to the theatre, that listening to especially opera, that sort of music, has a certain social status as well, and so that by attending those sort of things you're putting yourself up on a pedestal, which obviously Quakers famously are against. But either way, Quakerism and music did not go together really at all, at least for the first couple of 100 years. So unlike in other denominations where you would have things like hymns, you'd have choirs, maybe you'd have organs playing or whatever, Quakerism had none of that. And that remained the case pretty much up until the schisms that happened in the 19th century, really. And one could argue in England, probably a lot longer than that. With the schisms in America, however, what tended to happen is that evangelical Quakers and certain Orthodox Quakers as well, the minute that meetings start to become a bit more programmed is the word, but as in there is a program, there is a service, so to speak, music started to come back in. So you'd have hymns again and singing as a form of ministry. And I'm not really sure when in the UK that started to change. I mean, arguably you could say it hasn't. I'd say it's very rare in a liberal meeting, especially in the UK. I mean, I can't speak for all meetings and I can't speak for all Quakers, but from a liberal perspective, you don't hear much music in liberal Quaker meetings for worship in the UK. And I suppose perhaps the reason behind that is, whilst liberal Quaker theology has become quite more and more open in terms of its what's acceptable in terms of belief, it still maintains quite a rigid orthopraxy, and I suppose quite similar to conservative Quakers in that respect, perhaps. And because of that, music can't really feature in where silent meeting for worship is the mode by which we worship. That being said, though, obviously, this probably goes a lot further back. Quakers attend music concerts. They can attend the opera if they so wish, or whatever. All that sort of more wider worldly use of music. Those restrictions aren't on Quakers anymore. you have certain forms of Quakerism which use music quite a lot. I know, for example, in Kenya and African Quakerism, there's a lot more use of music than there certainly is in the UK. Depending on the type of Quakerism that you're delving into in America, you might hear a lot more music than you would, say, if you went to a liberal or conservative meeting. So you kind of got two things going on. For me personally, I think I've got nothing wrong in practice with music being in a meeting for worship, even in the liberal tradition. In my first meeting that I went to, a friend was saying that there used to be a Quaker who went there, who I think there was a piano in the meeting house, and she would stand up and she would go over to the piano and play something extemporaneously, as so led by the Spirit. So, and I've got nothing wrong with that. I think that's excellent, and it's surely as worthy of ministry as regular vocal ministry. You know, we all know the power that music has, and sometimes, you know, I've talked on the channel as well about how words can be difficult in liberal meetings, where phrases and words might, you know, upset certain or confuse certain friends, or bring up emotions that actually we're not looking for when giving vocal ministry. Whereas obviously music is universal, so you kind of avoid a lot of those difficulties by using music. And if you're talented enough to be able to play it extemporaneously, then that's amazing. Every year, I feel like I talk about this all the time, not having ever experienced it myself, but I talk about it a lot. Every year at Britain Yearly Meeting, there is a meeting for worship through dance, which I assume must involve music, therefore, unless it's, you know, some kind of silent disco. And so obviously it's coming in a bit, but I think that is a very exceptional type of meeting for worship, and certainly isn't something that I see too often in the UK, and maybe that is a shame. And so I suppose because of this, there isn't necessarily a huge amount of Quaker music. There is a playlist, two playlists in fact, I think I found on YouTube. One from John Watts, who I'm going to be talking about in a minute, and from Quaker Speak. So I'll put those down there so you can have a look at. However, I have done a bit of delving, had a lovely hour or two listening to various different types of Quaker music, which has been really nice. Not something that I've ever done before, so I really did enjoy that. And I thought I'd share those with you now. First thing that I have to share is, I'm not sure if I've actually put this on the channel, I put it on my social media and so on, but I got this John Greenleaf Whittier book from like 1898 or something like that, for like £10. And it's got all of his poetry in it. It's part of a playlist that I potentially have planned, or maybe it's just a fever dream in my mind, where I'm going to be traipsing around the Cornish coast, reciting Whittier poetry. Who knows whether that'd be any interest or any good, but anyway, that's why I bought that. But why I mention that in terms of music is because he's a very well-known Quaker poet. I'd say certainly the most famous Quaker poet anyway, and a lot of his stuff has been put to music, so I suppose he counts as perhaps a source of Quaker music. There's also the well-known hymn "How Can I Keep From Singing," which I thought it was a Quaker hymn, or a Quaker song at least. It's very well known in Quaker circles, and I just therefore assumed it was as, but apparently it's not, which is a shame, but it's really nice. I will put a lovely rendition down there as well for you to have a listen. Goers to Quaker camps and so on, I'm sure, are well acquainted with it already, but nonetheless, not a Quaker song, but nonetheless one that has been certainly adopted by Quakers. Speaking of songs that are maybe sung at Quaker camp, I mentioned John Watts before. He is probably better known nowadays for being the presenter and on the Quaker podcast, and before he founded and led Quaker Speak. But my first ever meeting with John Watts was through his rendition of the George Fox song, which I have listened to quite a few times today, and I think will be in my head for the remainder of the day. But as well as that, he's got an album as well, which is about Quakerism, really, in the form of lots of different types of song. He blends lots of things together. It's really good. So it's called "Clothe Yourself in Righteousness," and I'll put a link down there so you can go and listen to some of that as well. Another really interesting Quaker musician is Paulette Meier. So she's also, they're all Americans. My last one isn't. And she, as I said, is an American Quaker. But what she does that's really interesting is that she works with plain song, which I think, again, quite Quaker. But what she does is she takes quotes from famous early friends and puts them to song. So it's really good. So you kind of get best of both worlds there. You get a nice bit of music, but you also are learning about some of the experiences and some of the words of early friends, which is excellent. So she's got an album out as well called Timeless Quaker Wisdom, which is, as I said, going through those different early friends through plain song. And I'll put, as I said, links down at the bottom as well, as you can have a listen to that as well. And my last one, my last Quaker musician I wanted to talk about, who is British. So we can, all British listeners can relax. I haven't gone full American, and that is Sally Beamish. What I want to focus on one song in particular, one piece of music in particular, because this was the piece of music that was actually commissioned by Quakers. So it's called A Knock at the Door, and I haven't actually. I think I did listen to it ages ago because that's how I know her, but I can't seem to find it online anywhere. So if anyone can find it, can they let me know so I can put another link on so that people can listen to it? But I can't seem to find it anywhere. But it was commissioned by Quakers, by QCat. I can't remember what that stands for because I think that QCat is such a great name. But they're basically against, they're the Committee Against Torture. Oh, yeah, maybe it's that. Anyway, so the Committee Against Torture commissioned Sally Beamish to compose a song discussing that sort of discusses and symbolises and digs out the relationship or the long-term effects and the damage done by torture. And she does this. It's a very interesting style of music. It's two choirs sort of singing against each other. One of them kind of represents the victim of torture, and the other one is the torturer. And it kind of just looks at how they get to that place and where they go from there, and how they get enmeshed, and what this says about humanity. It's something to listen to. As I said, I just can't find it right now, which is really annoying. But great, because this is actually a piece of music which has been commissioned by Quakers, which doesn't happen very often. I mean, for me, I have no problem with music involved in music for worship. I suppose I wouldn't necessarily like it to be like, oh, this is the Sunday where we sing this hymn, and this hymn, and these hymns maybe not be Quaker hymns or whatever. I wouldn't like that so much. But, extemporaneous song, extemporaneous music, I'd be all for. When I was speaking to Mark Russ about the spirit of freedom and stuff, I mean, we can't, although liberal Quakers kind of cling to their orthopraxy so that they can have a very liberal range of beliefs, I think there has to be some movement there. Otherwise, how are we letting the spirit be free? So if the spirit comes to you and through song or through music, then I think we'd be remiss to reject that just because, it's not in the format that we usually do meeting for worship. I mean, that's nonsense. So I'm all for that. And I would like there to be more Quaker songs, just more Quaker music. I think obviously music is obviously really powerful, something that really can connect with people as well, newcomers as well. So I think that is something that I mean, not me personally, but I would love for more Quakers to explore. So what do you think? Music, yay or nay? I've had a lovely morning listening to all of these Quaker music and Quaker songs and stuff. So that's been great. So hopefully you've enjoyed listening, and we'll go off and listen to more Quaker songs, and you too will have the George Fox song stuck in your head for the rest of your day. And I will see you in the next video. See you later. With his shaggy, shaggy locks, walk in the spirit of the lights. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.